The night felt like a dream, the kind of night every family talks about for years afterward. The chandeliers glowed like floating stars, champagne sparkled in tall glasses, and laughter filled the air with warmth and wealth. My brother's wedding was nothing short of a luxury fairy tale, the kind that made every guest lift their phones to capture the perfection of it all. The women shimmered in satin gowns, men in designer suits, and every detail screamed sophistication. From the imported roses to the live jazz band humming softly in the background. But beneath all that shine, a quiet storm was brewing, one that only I could feel. It started with a single moment, a glimpse across the crowd that stole the air from my lungs. I was standing near the floral arch, greeting a few guests with polite smiles, when my eyes landed on her. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but no, she was real, standing there in a pale gold gown that shimmered under the light. Lara, my husband's ex. The woman whose name had been a silent ghost in our marriage, never spoken, never forgotten. And she wasn't just a guest who happened to show up. She was invited. She walked in confidently, her chin raised, her lips curved in a knowing smile, like someone walking into a room where she knew she still mattered. My heart began to pound so hard it felt like the music had gone quiet. I searched the crowd for Mark, my husband, and when I found him, he was already looking at her. It wasn't a long stare, but it was enough for me to see something I couldn't unsee. The flicker of recognition. A quick smile he didn't mean for me to catch. I froze, my fingers tightening around the stem of my champagne glass until it trembled. The world around me blurred for a moment. Guests laughed, the band played, people danced. But all I could hear was the sound of my heart breaking in a room full of applause. Mark walked toward me, his smile charming as always, his tuxedo crisp, his voice calm. "Everything okay, Em?" he asked, like nothing in the world was wrong. I wanted to ask him why she was there. I wanted to scream, cry, demand an answer. But all I managed was a quiet, "You invited her." He blinked, pretending to misunderstand. "Who?" he asked, feigning innocence so smooth it almost made me sick. I didn't answer. I just turned my gaze toward Lara, who was now greeting my parents as if she were an old family friend. My mother's awkward smile said it all. She didn't know either. This wasn't a family choice. It was his. I felt my stomach twist. How could he? This was supposed to be my brother's day, my family's celebration. And yet, somehow, my husband had turned it into something else entirely. A stage for his pride, his ego, his unresolved past. The humiliation wasn't loud or public. It was subtle, the kind that seeps into your bones quietly. I smiled when people looked at me, nodded when they spoke, all while feeling like I was drowning beneath my own skin. Every now and then, Mark would come to my side, placing a hand on my waist, playing the perfect husband in front of everyone. But his touch felt foreign. I kept thinking of all the moments he'd assured me that his past didn't matter, that I was his present, his forever. Those words now echoed like lies wrapped in velvet. As the night went on, I found myself standing alone near the entrance, staring out at the city lights. The air outside was cool, but my chest burned. I could see her inside through the glass doors, laughing with a group of our mutual friends, her hand brushing Mark's arm in an old, familiar way that told me everything I didn't want to know. It wasn't about cheating. It was about respect, or the lack of it. The moment stretched endlessly. I remembered how, years ago, when Mark and I first met, he used to tell me that he admired my strength, that I was different from the women who just wanted his money or his name. And I had believed him. I believed every word, every promise, every gesture. I built my world around the idea that I was loved for who I was, not for how well I fit into his world of power and status. But that night, as I watched his ex move through my family's celebration like she belonged there, I realized something painful. Maybe I was never really seen. Maybe I was just another part of the image he wanted to show the world. When I walked back inside, the music had shifted to something slower, softer. Couples were dancing, candles flickered on tables, and the world kept moving as if nothing had changed. But inside me, something had. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't even know if I could face him. But one thing was certain. This night would not end the way he expected. He might have thought he could walk through life controlling the narrative, but he had just invited the wrong ghost into the wrong story. And as I stood there, surrounded by beauty and lies, I promised myself one thing. I would not let him humiliate me quietly. If he wanted to play with appearances, I would show him the cost of pretending, not in anger, not in rage, but in a way that he would never forget. A lesson not in shouting, but in silence, dignity, and truth. The kind of lesson a man like him would feel long after the music faded. Before all the noise, before the wedding night that would change everything, life with Mark had felt like a movie. One of those picture-perfect romantic dramas where the girl from a quiet town finds herself swept into a world she never imagined belonging to. I was that girl. I grew up in a small community in Oregon, where life was simple. Sunday dinners with family, neighborhood potlucks, a job at a local design studio. Nothing about my world was loud or glamorous, but I had peace, laughter, and the kind of love that came from familiarity. When I met Mark, that all shifted. It was like stepping into another universe, one where everything sparkled, from the cars to the people, to the way he looked at me. He was confidence wrapped in charm, and I was drawn to him the way light draws in moths. Mark was a man everyone admired. At 36, he had built his wealth from scratch. No family inheritance, no secret backing, just relentless work and ambition. He was the kind of man who made every room stop for a second when he entered. The way he carried himself made people believe in his story. The millionaire who rose from nothing. When he met me at a charity gala my firm was designing for, he told me later that I reminded him of who he was before the money. "You make me feel grounded," he had said on our second date, over dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. I remember laughing, nervous, overwhelmed by his attention. No one had ever looked at me the way he did, like I was something rare. Our relationship moved fast. Within 6 months we were married. The proposal had been extravagant. Roses, fireworks, a custom diamond ring that caught the light every time I moved. My parents had been cautious, but I was in love, or at least what I thought love was supposed to feel like. I told myself we understood each other deeply, even though we came from completely different worlds. He admired my simplicity, and I admired his strength. We were supposed to balance each other. The early days were beautiful. We traveled, dined in places I used to only see in magazines, and posted photos that made people call us the perfect couple. But behind the filters and smiles, something quiet began to grow. A distance that wasn't about space, but about feeling unseen. Mark was always busy, always chasing the next deal, the next success. He'd come home late, loosen his tie, pour himself a drink, and talk about business like the world depended on his next decision. I'd listen, nod, offer words of support, and tell myself this was just what it meant to love a powerful man. But in those moments, I felt like a background character in his life story. Sometimes, on weekends, he would surprise me with lavish gifts, a necklace, a designer dress, or tickets to Paris, as if to remind me that love could be bought in glittering boxes. I used to smile, say thank you, and try to convince myself that these gestures meant more than the quiet conversations we no longer had. It wasn't that he was unkind. He was just detached, present in body, absent in spirit. I started noticing the small things. The way he avoided eye contact when he was distracted. How he always kept his phone face down. The long pauses when I asked about his day. It wasn't suspicion, at least not at first. It was loneliness. The kind that grows slowly until it fills every corner of a home that looks perfect on the outside. There were moments when I missed the old me. The woman who laughed easily, who didn't care about the kind of car she drove or the brand of her clothes. But Mark's world had expectations. His friends' wives were polished, poised, and always smiling. I had to fit in. I learned how to walk in heels that hurt, how to host dinners that looked effortless, and how to keep my feelings quiet to maintain peace. He never asked me to change, not directly, but his silence spoke louder than any request. Then came the part that always felt heavy between us. Her name. Lara. I never met her, but I knew about her long before the wedding night. She was the woman before me, the one he dated during his early years of success. Everyone said she was stunning, ambitious, and ruthless. Their breakup had been public, messy, filled with rumors of betrayal and ego. When I asked him about her once, his voice went cold. "That part of my life is over," he said, his tone final. I never asked again. But even though he said her name didn't matter, it felt like a shadow that never left our marriage. Every time his phone buzzed and he hesitated before answering, every time he turned a little too serious when someone mentioned his past, that shadow seemed to grow. Still, I loved him. Or maybe I loved who I thought he was. The man who once held my face in his hands and said I made him feel human again. I wanted to believe in us, in the version of our story that I told myself when things got difficult. But deep down, something in me knew that love without understanding eventually starts to suffocate. The signs were all there. The distance, the pride, the emotional walls. But I ignored them, convincing myself that every marriage has flaws, that maybe this was just part of ours. I didn't know then that my blind faith was about to meet its breaking point, that the small cracks in our perfect picture were already spreading. I had no idea that in a matter of days, all the illusion would come crashing down, and I would finally see the truth about the man I married, the woman he once loved, and the version of myself I'd lost trying to be enough for both of them. The days leading up to my brother's wedding felt like a blur of planning, fittings, and family chaos, the kind that fills every room with laughter and nerves. My parents were busy making sure everything was perfect, and my brother Ryan couldn't stop smiling. He was marrying the love of his life, a woman we all adored, and the entire event was set to be a grand celebration at a luxury estate just outside Los Angeles. I wanted to be happy for him, and I was. But somewhere beneath all the excitement, a strange unease kept tugging at me. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, subtle, the kind of discomfort you feel in your bones when something's wrong, but you can't name it yet. Mark, as always, was the picture of calm. He handled everything with his usual confidence, arranging the luxury cars for our arrival, making sure the gifts were extravagant, ensuring our presents looked perfect. He was charming at every family dinner, helping my mother with the seating chart, offering to cover extra expenses when things went over budget. Everyone praised him, calling him the ideal husband. And I smiled, agreeing, pretending that I didn't notice the way his eyes drifted elsewhere when I talked about little things, like my brother's nervousness or my mother's joy. He was there, but not really with me. A few days before the wedding, We were having coffee in our kitchen when he mentioned, almost casually, "Oh, by the way, I invited someone extra to the wedding." His tone was light, offhanded, like it was nothing important. I looked up from my cup, a little confused. "Who?" He hesitated, which wasn't like him. "Just an old friend, someone I haven't seen in a long time. It'll be good to catch up." I frowned. "An old friend? You mean a business partner?" He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, not business. Just someone from my past." And then it hit me. That sinking feeling I'd learned to ignore for years. I didn't say her name out loud, but it hung between us anyway. I could see it in his silence. "Mark," I said quietly, "are you talking about her?" He sighed, leaning back, trying to sound calm. "Emily, it's not what you think. We're adults. It's been years. I just thought it would be nice to bury the past and show there's no tension. It's a wedding, for God's sake." I stared at him, trying to find logic in what he was saying. "You thought it would be nice to invite your ex, the one you said you never wanted to see again, to my brother's wedding." He shrugged slightly, his expression cool. "It's harmless. You're overthinking this. I thought you'd understand." Understand. That word stung more than any insult. It was what he always said when he wanted to make me feel small, to make me question my own feelings. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly, my mind spinning. "If you think it's appropriate," I said softly, "then do what you think is right." That night, I lay in bed awake, staring at the ceiling. He was asleep beside me, breathing evenly, unaware of the storm building inside me. I kept imagining the scene. Her walking in, smiling that confident smile, the two of them exchanging polite words while everyone else pretended not to notice. I imagined whispers behind my back, my family's awkward glances, the humiliation I would have to hide behind grace. It wasn't jealousy. It was betrayal disguised as pride. He wasn't bringing her because he missed her. He was doing it because he could. Because power had made him careless, and my silence had made him comfortable. The morning of the rehearsal dinner, I tried to convince myself that maybe she wouldn't come. Maybe it was just talk, but deep down I knew better. The way he checked his phone more often, the quick smiles when messages came through. They all told the story I didn't want to read. When I asked who he was texting, he laughed it off. "Work," he said, as always. But his tone had that same smoothness, the one he used when he wanted to close a door in my face. By the time the wedding day arrived, my nerves were a mess. I tried to focus on my brother, on the joy in his eyes as he got ready, on the sound of my mother's laughter echoing through the halls. I told myself not to let Mark's decision ruin this day for my family. But every time I looked at him, standing tall in his suit, perfectly composed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside him was waiting, almost anticipating a reaction from me. That's the thing about people like Mark. They test boundaries quietly, not to destroy you, but to see how much you'll tolerate before you finally break. And I had given him too much room for too long. When we arrived at the venue, everything was breathtaking. White roses everywhere, chandeliers glimmering like stars, a soft golden glow cast over the entire ballroom. But as I stood at the entrance, greeting guests, my heart sank with each new face that walked in. Every woman in a gold dress made me hold my breath for a second too long, and then finally, she appeared. Laura. I felt time slow down as she walked through the doors, elegant, confident, her eyes scanning the room until they found him. That was when I knew this wasn't just a guest list oversight or a casual invitation. It was deliberate, a choice, a test. And in that moment, the tension I had been trying to ignore for years turned into something sharp and alive. It wasn't anger yet, not quite. It was the realization that my marriage wasn't built on trust anymore, but on illusion. The illusion that silence meant peace, that patience meant strength. I looked at Mark across the room, smiling politely as people greeted him, and I understood something painful but clear. This night wasn't just my brother's wedding. It was the beginning of my awakening. Dinner had started, and the ballroom glowed in soft gold and ivory light. The waiters moved quietly between tables, pouring champagne into crystal glasses, and the sound of laughter filled the air. My brother and his new wife looked radiant at the center table, surrounded by friends and family who toasted to their happiness. Everything was perfect, at least on the surface, but for me, the perfection had started to feel like a performance, one I didn't want to be a part of anymore. Across the room, I could see Lara. She looked exactly how I imagined she would. Elegant, confident, and comfortable in every inch of her skin. She wasn't trying too hard, which somehow made it worse. She didn't need to. She already carried the history that tied her to my husband. And that invisible thread between them was visible to me with every glance. Every polite laugh they shared. Mark sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on mine as if nothing was wrong. He smiled at guests, told stories, and played the part of the charming husband with effortless ease. But his body language betrayed him. The way his eyes followed her movements. The way his smile lingered when she laughed across the table. It wasn't love. It wasn't desire. It was familiarity. That dangerous kind that exists between two people who used to be something, who know each other too well to pretend otherwise. I tried to eat, but every bite tasted like ash. The speeches began. My father spoke first, his words filled with warmth, pride, and gratitude. Then Ryan gave his toast to his new wife, his voice trembling with emotion. Everyone clapped, some teared up, and I forced a smile. When it was Mark's turn to say a few words, because of course he'd been asked to speak, he stood tall, confident, the perfect blend of humor and grace. His speech was smooth, practiced, the kind that made everyone adore him. And then, out of nowhere, his eyes flicked toward Lara as he said, "It's a blessing to see old friends here tonight. Some people remind us where we've been, and how far we've come." It was one sentence, just one, but it felt like a blade slipping between my ribs. No one else noticed the weight of it, but I did. The way her lips curved slightly, the way his eyes softened for half a second, told me everything. He had invited her to prove something, not to her, not to me, but to himself. To show that he could stand in the same room with his past and feel untouchable, that he was above emotions, above awkwardness, that he was still in control. I wanted to leave. Every fiber of my being screamed to get up, walk out, and never look back. But I didn't. I stayed, because walking away in that moment would have given him the satisfaction of seeing me small. And I wasn't small. Not anymore. So I sat there, quiet, calm, my hands folded neatly on the table, and watched the man I married expose his arrogance in front of hundreds of people without even realizing it. When dinner ended, people began to move toward the dance floor. The band started playing something slow, romantic. Mark turned to me and asked, "Dance with me?" His voice was gentle, unaware of the fire he had lit inside me. I stared at him, at his confident smile, and for a brief moment, I wondered if he had any idea what he'd done. Maybe he didn't. Maybe men like him never did, not until it was too late. I excused myself instead. "I need some air," I said softly, and before he could respond, I walked away. The night air outside was cooler than I expected, the soft hum of the city mixing with distant laughter from inside. The garden lights glowed softly, casting long shadows across the marble path. I leaned against one of the pillars, taking a shaky breath. I told myself not to cry, not here, not now. But my throat burned with anger and humiliation. and then I heard voices. Low, familiar ones. I turned slightly, following the sound until I saw them, Mark and Lara, standing a few steps away, half hidden behind one of the large floral arches. They didn't see me. She was smiling, her head tilted slightly, her tone playful but controlled. "I didn't expect you to actually invite me," she said softly. Mark chuckled under his breath, his voice calm, casual. "Why wouldn't I? I wanted to show there's no hard feelings. We've both moved on. Emily's fine with it. She's understanding." The word hit me like a slap. Understanding. That was how he saw me, as someone who would always smile, always forgive, always absorb his carelessness in silence. Lara smirked faintly. "Does she know that's what you think of her?" He didn't answer, just smiled, and that silence said more than any words could. I turned away before they could see me. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so hard it made my head spin. I wasn't angry because he was speaking to her. I was angry because of what it meant, that he thought my love was unshakable, that he could test me endlessly and I'd always stay. That inviting his ex to my brother's wedding wasn't a betrayal, but a game of pride he thought he could win. Standing there in the garden, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't rage or heartbreak. It was awakening. For the first time, I saw Mark clearly, stripped of the charm and the wealth and the carefully polished image he'd built. I saw the man who had forgotten that love isn't about power or control. It's about respect. And in that quiet moment, under the soft glow of garden lights, I decided that this would be the last time he would mistake my silence for weakness. When I walked back into the ballroom, the lights seemed brighter, almost too bright, like the world wanted to make sure every detail of my humiliation was visible. The laughter felt louder, the music sharper, and the space between Mark and me heavier than it had ever been. I could see him through the crowd, surrounded by people, laughing effortlessly as if nothing had happened. Lara stood nearby, her golden dress catching the light each time she turned, blending into the glamour of the night as if she belonged there. But she didn't. She wasn't part of this family, this moment, or this life we were supposed to share. And yet, because of him, she was right in the middle of it. I should have cried. That's what a woman in my place was supposed to do. Cry quietly, hide behind the excuse of being tired or emotional, and let the man explain away the mess he made. But instead, a strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes right before a storm. I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel weak. I just felt done, completely done with being the understanding wife who kept her pain polished and polite. As the music softened for the father-daughter dance, everyone gathered near the dance floor. My brother took my mother's hand for a moment before leading his new wife out to dance. The crowd cheered, phones lifted, and the air filled with warmth again. I stood near the DJ booth, my heart pounding in my chest, but my mind was clear, crystal clear. And when the music ended before the next song began, I stepped forward. The DJ looked at me, a little confused, as I gently took the microphone from him. "Can I say something?" I asked softly, smiling as if I were about to toast the bride and groom. The crowd turned to me, faces expectant and smiling. My brother gave me an encouraging nod. Mark's expression shifted slightly. Surprise, then confusion. He didn't know what was coming. And for once, that gave me power. "Before we continue," I began, my voice steady, "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. This day means so much to my family, to my brother, to his beautiful wife, to all of us who have watched their love grow into something so pure." The audience smiled, clapped lightly. Everything seemed normal. Weddings, I continued, glancing around, are about love, about respect, about choosing someone and honoring that choice every single day. My eyes found Mark across the room. He froze. Lara shifted uncomfortably beside him. The air changed. People could feel it even if they didn't understand it yet. Marriage, I said softly, isn't tested by the big things. Money, distance, time. It's tested by the small ones. The moments when one person forgets that love also means dignity. When they stop seeing their partner as their equal and start treating them like someone who will always forgive, no matter what. The room was silent now. Even the music had stopped. I smiled gently, my voice never shaking. To my husband, I said finally, looking straight at him. Thank you for reminding me of something I had forgotten, that not every betrayal comes from cheating. Some come from pride, some from thoughtlessness, and some from forgetting the value of the person standing beside you. A few people looked around awkwardly, trying to understand what was happening. My brother took a step forward, his face full of concern, but I gave him a reassuring nod. You see, I continued, my voice softer now, love isn't about power. It's about respect, and when that respect disappears, the love eventually follows. So tonight, while we celebrate two people who truly honor each other, I just want to say, never take for granted the heart that beats for you. Because one day, it might stop quietly, and all you'll be left with is silence. I placed the microphone gently back into the DJ's hands. For a second, the room stayed silent. The kind of silence that hums, thick with realization. And then someone started clapping. I don't know who it was, but soon others joined, unsure but compelled by the emotion in the air. I didn't look at Mark again. I didn't need to. I knew he understood. His face had gone pale, his mask cracked just enough for guilt to show through. I turned and walked out before anyone could stop me. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing through the hallway. The night air hit me like freedom when I stepped outside. I walked past the fountains, past the line of parked cars, and kept going until I reached the quiet garden at the back of the venue. Only then did I let myself breathe. The tears didn't come immediately. They arrived slowly, like the sky deciding to rain after holding it in too long. I sat on a stone bench beneath the string lights, wiping at my face, feeling a strange mix of pain and relief. I wasn't proud of what I did. It wasn't revenge. It was truth. For years I had been silent every time he made me feel small. Every time he dismissed my feelings as overreactions. Every time he made me believe that patience was strength when it was really self-betrayal. But not tonight. Tonight, I reclaimed the voice I had been too afraid to use. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. I knew it was him. Emily, Mark said softly. His voice was low, shaken in a way I hadn't heard before. Why did you do that? I looked up at the dark sky. Because you needed to hear it, I said quietly, and I needed to finally say it. He sighed, stepping closer. You embarrassed me. I turned to face him, my tears drying. No, Mark, you embarrassed us. I just made sure you saw it. He didn't say another word. For once, the man who always had the right thing to say, who always controlled every moment, had nothing. And that silence, and that was my victory. I stood, walked past him, and left him standing there under the same lights where he had thought he could play with my pride. That night I didn't lose anything. I simply returned everything that never truly belonged to me. The image, the silence, the illusion. All that remained was truth, and that was more powerful than any revenge I could ever plan.